AMOLED and LCD displays are based on different technologies. They each have their own ups and downs. In this video, I have the Nexus 6P, which uses an AMOLED display, and the Nexus 5X, which uses an LCD IPS display. The biggest advantage that an AMOLED screen offers, in my opinion, is that the light comes from the individual pixels themselves, rather than a backlight that an LCD screen would use. This results in pixels on an AMOLED display being able to turn off completely when they are fully black, resulting in deep blacks and high contrast levels which look great. Not only does it look great, but there are also power savings to be had by turning off individual pixels, which can increase battery life. This is in comparison to a backlight panel that LCD screens use to produce light, which must always be on, resulting in blacks not getting as dark as an AMOLED as constant light is required. This also results in LCD screens generally being brighter than AMOLED screens, making them better for viewing in direct sunlight. This backlight can, however, introduce undesirable backlight bleed around the sides of the panel, which is something to watch out for. Colors on an AMOLED display are typically more oversaturated, which makes them pop a lot more compared to an LCD screen, while LCD screens, on the other hand, generally provide more realistic color reproduction. AMOLED displays can be thinner, owing to there not being a backlight behind the screen. However, they can also be more costly to produce, resulting in higher prices. While both display technologies have great viewing angles, I think there is a slight edge to LCD IPS. On extreme angles, the LCD display of the Nexus 5X looks slightly better than the AMOLED display of the Nexus 6P. Another downside to AMOLED is that over time the screens can burn in. This is something that's less of an issue with current LCD screens. This takes a long time to happen though, and can be mitigated by changing what regularly displays on the screen, such as your wallpaper or moving icons around. AMOLED does allow for some pretty cool features though, such as ambient display in Android, which will show important notifications on a black screen, only lighting up the required pixels to do so while keeping the rest of the pixels black and powered off. So these type of notifications only use a very minimal amount of power. So in summary, if you're after more realistic colors and a brighter display, an LCD screen may be for you. Alternatively, if you're after colors that really pop, increased battery life as a result from black content with amazing deep blacks and high contrast levels, an AMOLED screen may be for you. It's
different types of displays that people and manufacturers talk about: Super AMOLED and Retina and Infinity, and there's basically two types of display. There's LED based displays and there's LCD based displays. Now an LED display is, as you find in AMOLED, is the LED part starts for light emitting diode, just like you get on that little red light that you get on your TV that tells you whether your TV is on or off. That's basically an LED. Now in an AMOLED display, they are reduced down to very small sizes, and there are red LEDs and blue LEDs and green LEDs, and they're grouped together in little kind of pixelated forms, little triangles, okay, that when you light them up together at different intensities, you can get all the different color ranges. So if they're all off, you get black. If they're all on, you get white. And then if you kind of have more red on than you have other colors, you get a red color, and so on. That's how it works. And basically the A for the AMOLED part basically means active matrix, because basically what happens is that there is a way of putting a thin layer of transistors over the connecting up to these LEDs, and it makes them turn on and off very fast, which gives you this active matrix organic LED display. And basically the advantages of AMOLED is that you get this great contrast, because when the LEDs are off, they're off, and you get these deep blacks, and that means that when they're on, and you get this great difference in contrast ratio, because you get this deep. Now when people talk about Super AMOLED, basically Super AMOLED is an AMOLED display and a touchscreen matrix that have been put together in a single unit, rather than there being two that go on top of each other or with some glass or other kind of substrate between them. They are all part of one display, and that's what they call Super AMOLED. And Infinity display is basically an AMOLED display that you find on the S8, the S8 Plus, and of course on the Note 8, that basically gives you this idea of this edge-to-edge bezel-less display, but it's basically still an AMOLED or a Super AMOLED display. Now the counterpart to AMOLED is LCD, an LCD, liquid crystal display. Now I'm sure I'm going to say LCD display, which really means liquid crystal display. Okay, everybody does it, don't worry about it. LCD basically means that there are crystals that when you apply current to them, they can let a certain amount of light through or not let a certain amount of light through, and they all work by having a backlight which shines a light across the whole display, and then you change the crystals to let certain light through, and then once you add in some polarization and some color filters, you can basically get red, green and blue coming up at each little place on the screen by controlling what light is able to go through from the backlight. Now the problem with LCD is that when you have a black display, the backlight is still powering at full power and all the crystals are set so no light goes through it. So you're still using the same amount of energy on a dark display, on a bright display, the same battery power is always being used. Now when you hear IPS, that's in-plane switching, that's basically a second generation of LCD display that's got great viewing angles and also has some great color reproduction, and basically all displays today are IPS. Like you've got Super AMOLED, you've also got Super LCD. That basically means a display and a touchscreen that are built together as one single unit. And when it comes to Apple products, they've got this idea of Retina. Now, Retina displays are generally LCD displays. We'll just talk about the one that isn't in a moment. But basically, it's LCD displays, and it first came out in mobile with the iPhone 4 because it had a greater screen pixels per inch than the previous iPhone 3GS. And then when you got to the Apple device that got 720p or greater, that gave us Retina HD. But Retina and Retina HD are basically LCD displays. But now with the launch of the iPhone 10, you've got Super Retina HD, which is basically an AMOLED display, and that is using a higher resolution. So Apple have moved to an AMOLED display with the iPhone 10. Better. On the one hand, AMOLED displays have got this advantage of having the off means off, you get less power being used, you've got good color reproduction. However, you've got this problem of burning on some devices. They tend to be found more in high-end flagship phones because they are more expensive to manufacture. On the other side, LCDs don't have burn-in, but they do have image retention. The color reproduction of today's IPS LCD displays are pretty good and certainly comparable to those of the AMOLED displays. However, of course, the backlight is always on. Even when you're showing a black pixel, the battery power is still being used to power up that light, and then it's just being blocked so no light gets through. Now, you'll find IPS LCD displays more on mid-range phones and more on low-end phones, but of course there are still lots of high-end phones, including Quad HD phones that are using LCD. So both technologies are moving side by side. They're kind of going along together, and people have a preference for one for the other. Personally, as long as the display is good, and when I pick up a device, whether it be an LCD device or whether it be an AMOLED device, as long as I can see that it's a good display, good vibrant colors, good contrast ratio.
Today's video, I want to compare the 60 Hz, 90 Hz, and 120 Hz display refresh rates. What we have here from left to right is a Galaxy Note 10 Plus with 60 Hz, a Galaxy S20 Ultra with 120 Hz, and a OnePlus 7 Pro with 90 Hz refresh rate. So I'm going to launch apps and scroll through websites as I play the video in slow motion so you can see how all the three refresh rates compare in slow motion, and by seeing that you'll understand why a higher refresh rate makes a phone feel smoother to scroll and operate. So let's dive in. Alright, so let's start with actually launching an application. So I'm going to launch it on the OnePlus 7. There we go. Let's go back home. I'm going to relaunch it, and as you can see, it looks pretty smooth. That's 90 Hz refresh rate slowed down. Alright, so it doesn't look that bad. Now let's do it on the S20 Plus. So I'm going to launch it, and that looks much smoother. Maybe not too much, but it definitely looks smoother. Let's do it one more time. All right, smooth coming up and smooth coming down, 120 Hz. Now let's do it on the 60 Hz refresh rate, and you will notice a stutter. There we go. So there was a stutter there. Let's go back in and back out. So you can notice the stutter. That's not the phone. That's not to say the phone is slow. When you slow it down, you can see the animations stutter, and that's why it feels more smooth in the higher refresh rate. So let's launch it. Again, you saw that it launched smoother. The OnePlus 7 is going to launch smooth as well. That's 90 Hz. All right. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to actually scroll through the website. So let's do some scrolling. All right. So let's scroll through the entire web page. Again, as you can see, Now in real life, it looks pretty fast, but when you slow it down, you can catch the stutter because it is only 60 hertz. We're going to do it on the the S20 Plus. Let's do that right now. All right, so you can see that there's much less stutter that the video can catch at slowed down motion, and that's why it feels smoother in real life when you don't slow it down. Take a look at that. So there's definitely stutter, all right over here on the Note 10 Plus. And then we'll go back to the S20 Ultra, and again, as you can see, much less stutter, all right? It's a smoother scrolling. Now let's move on to OnePlus 7 Pro. All right, so not as good as the S20 Ultra, obviously, but obviously better than the 60 hertz on the Note 10 Plus. But again, you notice, you can see why the S20 Ultra will feel the smoothest of all these three phones, especially